We get off to a good start and are up 1,000 early on. 20 hands later, I straddle to 50. Cinnabon, who is always smelling delicious in malls, raises to 175 in the cutoff with 4 deuce suited. Dylan has 7-6 diamonds in the third blind. He calls for 150 more. It's 125 for us to call. I'm on the fence about it with 10-9 offsuit. We're closing the action against a known bluffer, plus we're getting a good price. I call to see the flop. 3 of us are in the mix. The flop comes Jack 9-5 with 2 diamonds and a club. Surprisingly, 4 deuce suited isn't doing all that well on this board. Dylan, on the other hand, smashes it with his flush draw straight draw combo. We've got middle pair and a backdoor straight draw. It's checked to the initial pre-flop raiser. He didn't open with 4 deuce to check back flops. He fires for 150. It's just over 1/4 pot, very small sizing. Dylan is happy to stick around for that price. He calls. I'm getting almost 6 to 1. I don't see how I can fold at this juncture. I call to see what develops. The turn is the king of spades. It gives us a gutter, but since it's an overcard to the board, it again should be a better card for Cinnabon, the initial pre-flop raiser, and place where he used to love getting free samples, or maybe still do. Dylan checks. His hand is looking less and less appealing, with only 1 card to come and 2 opponents who could potentially have better draws, or even have 7-6 of diamonds drawing dead. I check with what's currently the best hand. Cinnabon knows that I know the king will often help him improve, and since he didn't get check raised on the flop, he continues with his story that he's got a big hand by betting 800. Dylan can't justify calling for that amount without even having a draw to the nuts. He folds. The situation for us is interesting. For one thing, we have Cinnabon's actual hand drawing stone dead. We've been downgraded to third pair, but we have a couple of key cards. Our 9 makes it way less likely that we're up against a strong hand like a set of 9s, or 2 pair hands like Jack 9 and King 9. Our 10 makes it way less likely that we're up against Queen 10 for the straight and King 10. What's even better is that we don't have any diamonds in our hand, increasing the probability that our opponent could have a diamond draw and may not be able to call a raise. I tend to have a solid image, which gives me more credibility when I make moves. I'm up against someone who's already shown this session that he's willing to bet with air. 10-9 isn't strong enough to call, but I'm not ready to give up.
Let's see what Brad does. He's got a gutter here and third pair. And Brad raises him. What a move. Probably recognizes Cinnabon is on tilt, trying to make a move. Really nice raise there from Brad, turning his third pair and got shot into a bluff. I really like that play there, Rick.
Cinnabon is open for business all day. Even though our third pair has the opponent drawing dead, this is one of my favorite plays that I've made, using my own intuition mixed with some lessons that I've gotten from Nick Petrangelo as part of the Cash Game course that's now out on Upswing called Smash Live Cash.
I don't think Brad is an airport apparel purchaser. I think he's smarter than that. Airport apparel is 30% more than anything else you'll see.
While they're betting sandwiches on my attire, Cedric raises a 60 from under the gun with pocket 4s. The dealer gets confused because Radley has such a similar name to mine and accidentally gives him the hand that was clearly supposed to be dealt to us. Radley 3-bets the jiggities to 200. He's going to find out the hard way there's no right way to play those bad boys. We're in the big blind with ace-4 of hearts. We capitalize on the image we've cultivated so far this session with our lack of involvement by putting in the cold 4-bet to 700. We're coming in hot. Seti's pocket 4s isn't a $700 hand. He lets it go. The jiggities are much better and it's only 500 more for Radley to call in position. The cold 4-bet just looks so strong. It's always very hard to beat us with our own hand while having the last 6 letters of our first name. Radley makes a snug laydown as a 2-1 favorite. It looks like I've got rockets. Instead, I have fake aces. Our first move of the day works out. There will be plenty of more similar plays though. Shortly after, Skull Mike takes a seat at the table to settle his bet with Rick for the sandwich. Listen closely.
It wouldn't be as popular.
Where'd you buy that shirt?
Yes!
Nice. There you go, Mike. There you go.
I have the airport, Rick had downtown.
Next, we're first to act with ace-king offsuit and the straddle to 40 on. We raise to 100. It folds to high in the $20 blind. He has ace-10 offsuit and makes the call. We're heads up in position with the best hand. At least until the flop comes ace-queen 10 with 2 hearts. We have top, a gutter, and a backdoor flush draw, but high has the lead with top and bottom pair. He checks the trap. There's no reason to think that we're not best. Plus, we have a draw to the nuts and card removal, making it less likely that we're up against 2 pair or a straight. We fire for 100. That's not the price we'll be paying to see the turn. High raises to 375. It's too early to give up on this, given all that we have going for us. We call for 275 more, not exactly loving the situation. The most likely hand I put the opponent on is Queen 10, or some sort of combo draw like Jack 9 of hearts. The turn is the 5 of spades. It's a blank that eliminates our backdoor flush possibility. High keeps up the pressure with a bet of 675. It's getting expensive, but we have a lot of cards that can help us. In this exact scenario, we're getting 3-1 on a call and have nearly a 25% chance of winning the hand, so we're getting about the right pot odds to stick around, given what the opponent has, particularly if we factor in the possibility of winning extra on the river in the event that we improve. I call, it's a large pot, the river is the jack of hearts, we make a straight, but it isn't hidden, and the flush draw gets there. The good news is that holding the king of hearts is very beneficial for us, and having the jack of hearts come out on the board is decent as well, since we can rule out the opponent having big combo draws on the flop, like jack 9 or jack 8 of hearts. It's a lot less probable that we're going to be up against a flush, especially when the opponent checks. I doubt he has a king, he seems genuinely disappointed with the run out, he'll have 2 pair a lot of the time, and may not be able to call a big bet. We attempt to milk him with a tiny bet of 500. It's 20% the size of the pot, putting high in the blender. It's summertime, all we need to do is to add some rum, carousel, orgeat syrup, lime juice, and a pineapple spear to top it off, then we'd have ourselves a high tie. High doesn't want to wait to watch the stream later to see what we're taking him to Value Town with, he wants to see it now, and he makes the call. We get a fortunate run out to win a nice pot. This is quite possibly my new lucky shirt, well worth any airport premium. We're up 2,400 so far while wearing it. The straddle to 20 is back on. Ron has 5-4 suited in the hijack and raises to 70. The button wants to get involved, he calls with ace-jack offsuit. We're in the big blind with ace-7 of clubs. I don't really love any option. In a normal cash game, folding to avoid the situation entirely is most reasonable. There's a little more pressure to get involved on stream. I was on the fence anyway, I call to make things interesting. We're going 3 ways to the flop, it comes 4-3 deuce with 2 diamonds and a club. We've got a gutter, 2 overs, and a backdoor flush draw. I check. Ron gets a surprisingly good flop for the hand that he raised pre-flop with. He has top pair and an open-ended straight draw. This isn't always going to be too incredible for his range when he's second to act and opens. Ron bets 90. Radley has a similar hand to me with a straight draw and 2 overs. He calls. When he doesn't raise on such a draw-heavy board, it makes it very unlikely that Radley has a set. He could potentially have something like ace-5 suited, but there aren't many combos of that hand that we need to be worried about. We've already discussed that typically the flop won't be great for the pre-flop aggressor's range, even though it kind of is given what Ron's currently holding. Our hand has plenty of potential, but likely isn't best. I don't want to flat to try and hit a 5, to probably chop with another opponent, or even lose if someone has a hand like pocket 6s. I've identified this situation as one in which my opponents won't always be strong. Us, on the other hand, we have a high percentage of monsters in our range. Let's take a look at the most applicable pre-flop chart that Nick Petrangelo gave me. It'll be part of a cash game course that we're coming out with on Upswing in a few months. This chart shows what we should do if we're in the big blind in a straddle pot and someone in the hijack raises followed by a button call. We see that with our actual hand of ace-7 suited, we can mix in calling indicated by the yellow or folding. We also see that we should be pure calling pre-flop raises with pocket 4s, 3s, and deuces. Those all give us a set on this board. We're supposed to call most of the time pre-flop with ace-5 suited and 6-5 suited as well, good for straights on this board. We have all the strongest possible hands in our range based on what we did pre-flop. With the hand slightly too weak to call, I represent the nuts or something close to it by putting in a check raise to 425. If it doesn't get through, I can potentially make a straight, hit an ace, or pick up a flush draw on the turn. Ron's stack isn't accurate in the graphics on the left, by the way. He has about 1,800 in front of him. The purple chips are worth 500 each, and he has 2 of those. Ron reasonably calls with a relatively strong hand and removal to the nuts, leaving himself with around 1,500 behind. Once he calls, I can rule out him having a set or a straight other than one containing 2 diamonds. Radley quickly folds, it's down to heads up. The turn is the 10 of clubs, giving us a flush draw. I love seeing that because we pick up tons of additional outs. Since Ron only has slightly more than a pot-sized bet left in his stack, I turn the pressure up to 11 and continue the story that we've got it. I put in 3 yellow chips that are worth 1,000 each and overbet shove for 1,500 effective. I anticipate being up against a pocket pair above 4s a lot of the time. We don't get snap called, so it's confirmed that we're not up against 2 pair or better. Ron is more than a 2-1 favorite, yet we've put him in the blender. I wouldn't want to be in his shoes. He's facing an overbet all-in after being downgraded a second pair with a straight draw, and there's only 1 card to come. Ron could already be drawing dead to a chop. Ultimately, the opponent folds. I don't blame him. I would have folded as well. We get a big semi-bluff through to win a nice sized pot. Sashimi has pocket 10s in the hijack and raises to 30. Ron loves king-jack offsuit more than Matthew McConaughey hates wearing t-shirts. He calls with it once more. Radley's trying to fight, or is right, to sit down. He calls with 9-6 suited. McLovin has to make sure that Radley doesn't win the pot, otherwise McLovin will have to pay everyone $50, so he comes along for 25 more. We wake up with an actual hand in the third blind. It's time to punish everyone with ace-king. I take a second to assess the situation and figure out the sizing that we should go with. I make it 200. Sashimi thinks that I'm trying to buy it. I wouldn't mind if everyone folded. You can see that I have the most equity, but it's still only at 28%. Sashimi puts in the 4-bet to 500. She's really only supposed to be 4-betting me a very small percentage of the time. Pocket 10s actually does better as a flat because Sashimi could be crushed or will be flipping a lot of the time. If she called and allowed the other players to call behind her, that isn't that bad since she'd be playing mostly to hit a set, and it's often good to have more opponents in the hand when you have a set, particularly when the stand-up game is on and people are playing all kinds of junk that they're incentivized to bluff with. It folds back to me. We know 1 ace and 1 king are accounted for, cutting in half the amount of combos of pocket aces and pocket kings Sashimi could have, which are really the only hands that Sashimi should be 4-betting us with for value in this spot. There are only 6 combos of those total. Meanwhile, there are 9 combos of ace-king still available that we could be up against, so I put her mostly on that, perhaps queens, jacks, or some other type of bluff. I call for 300 more, which I might also do with aces as a trap, and then hands like queens and jacks. We're heads up, the flop comes 8-8-3 rainbow, we've got nothing and we're up against an overpair. I check, the opponent doesn't need to bet too much here, she fires for 400. I could call because I'm getting a good price. I'm not 100% sure what I'm up against, but I've significantly discounted aces and kings since we have removal for those. Several other holdings will have a relatively difficult time calling a check raise when I can still have queens, jacks, and even rockets. Ace-king is still a very likely hand that we'll be up against. If I call here, Sashimi could potentially get me off a chop later down the road, but if I raise, she'll have to fold ace-highs, including ace-king, a good percentage of the time. If she calls a check raise, I can just give up if I don't improve, knowing with a decent amount of certainty that we're beat. One thing that I noticed from Sashimi in previous hands is that she tends to play very aggressively pre-flop and could have a wider 4-bet range than she's theoretically supposed to. With this in mind, I could actually have the best hand fairly often. I don't really like folding or calling and playing out of position in a large pot without a ton of showdown value. The opponent just doubled up and likely won't want to immediately lose a massive pot right after. The graphics for her stack are incorrect, by the way. It says that she has over 8,000 in front of her, but in reality, she has about the same stack as us. She's not going to want to get stacked after she just got those chips. If she has a close decision, I imagine that she may lean more towards taking a less risky line. I'm considering all these factors, then eventually decide I'm going for the home run. I make it 1,300. Sashimi isn't happy to see that. It's hard for her to imagine that I'd have called a 4-bet pre-flop, then check raise flop without something better than 10s. On the flip side, it'd be super sick if she ever shoved here as a bluff since I'll only sometimes have aces and I'll have to fold nearly everything else. There's no shove this time. Sashimi somewhat over-aggressively played her 10s and I applied the aggressiveness right back to induce a fold from the best hand. We get a massive bluff through to break into the green today with some style points.
What a play by Brad. Incredible play.
Gets through.
Strong
And the
play.
Brad Owen fans go wild. Good play, Mr. Owen.
We look at the initial chip counts to start the game. Doug and Jay win by in for 20,000 and 15,000 respectively. The rest of us are in for 10,000. This game is huge. About a half hour in, we get an opportunity to get in the mix. By the way, there's at least one straddle on for every hand, so this one is 25, 50, 100. Doug has pocket jiggities and a second to act pre-flop. He raises to 250. We've got something that we'd like to play. We're in kind of early middle position with pocket 6s. This is a spot where the vast majority of players are going to flat the initial pre-flop raise with the small to medium pocket pair under these conditions. That's totally fine, but I've been doing some studying with Nick Petrangelo for part of the cash game course that's still going to be coming out on Upswing. It's just been pushed back a few months and is scheduled to be released in the fall now. Anyway, here's a look at the pre-flop chart Petrangelo gave me for this exact situation. You'll notice that you're supposed to play a tight range since there are still several players left to act behind. It's mostly a 3-bet or fold strategy. Even with 6s, folding well over 50% of the time is the correct play, mixed in with some calls and some 3-bets that you see represented with the green. When I'm on stream, I try to take the more aggressive line as often as possible. The camera barely picks it up in the left of the screen, but I 3-bet to 700. It's not necessarily something that Doug or anyone else at the table would expect, and these guys are sharp guys. I need to do things that will occasionally catch people off guard in order to be successful at these stakes.
Wow, Brad getting after it here. 3-bets to 700.
Anybody want anything from the fridge? Soda? On me.
Owner on owner crime here. Partial owners of the club, Doug Polk, Brad Owen.
That's okay.
Doug makes the call, which he's supposed to do around 80% of the time because often I'll have at least 2 overs, if not an overpair. My 3-bet with 6s is just a low frequency play. Sometimes when you take a risk, you get punished, and sometimes you get rewarded. The flop comes 10-6 deuce rainbow, we've got a completely hidden middle set, and what's even better is that Doug has an overpair to the board. Doug checks, we've got the second best hand possible in what's becoming a large pot. I want to make sure that we're able to keep the opponent in with a wide variety of holdings and possibly induce a check raise. We down bet to 500 to make it very enticing to at least stick around with a call. This board won't always be great for my range. Pretty regularly, I'll just have an ace-high type of hand that Doug may want to protect against. Doug just calls, which I anticipated him doing with lots of hands, so this doesn't help me narrow down his range too much. He could have a 10, maybe 2 overs with backdoor draws, maybe small or medium pocket pairs, and there's some small chance that he has jacks or queens, but those are discounted since he didn't 4-bet us pre-flop, which he'll do at least some percentage of the time, and he didn't check raise us on the flop, which he'll probably do some percentage of the time as well. The turn is the 3 of clubs. It's a sweet card because no additional hands are beating us that are plausible. If Doug has 3s, we might be able to get it all in. If he has 4s or 5s, we can probably get at least one more additional street of value. Hands like 9s and 8s won't be afraid of the 3 either. Doug checks again. We need to start building this pot up a little more. Ideally, we want to set ourselves up to get all the money in on or by the river. I bet 1200. It's slightly less than half the pot. Maybe it's on the small side considering what Doug has and what I just stated is our goal, but it makes it seem as if maybe I'm playing cautiously or afraid of something, and it again provides an opportunity for Doug to check raise us. The smaller we bet, the more hands opponents can check raise us with. Doug's going nowhere for that price. He calls. Now I'm beginning to think that queens and jacks are a lot more likely, given that Doug has made it all the way to the river after I 3-bet pre-flop, bet on the flop, and bet on the turn. I still wouldn't be too surprised to be up against ace-10 suited, 9s, 8s, 7s, 5s, and 4s. The river is the 8 of hearts. I'm somewhat worried that we're up against a set of 8s. Other than that, it's a great card. I don't have to be concerned that Doug will have 9-7 suited because he would have folded that at some point pre-flop. Doug checks. I want to target his queens, jacks, and ace-10 hands because he won't be calling a third barrel with many other combos. Overpairs and top pair hands should be able to call a fairly large bet. I consider shoving for around 8,000. I might do that as a bluff with a hand like Miss Clubs, Ace-5, or Ace-4. I just don't want to squander this opportunity to make at least some money and give Doug a chance to get away from something like an overpair, which he's definitely capable of folding if I jam. I announce about a 4,000.
A quick 4,000. And see Doug's face, he's disgusted. He's got a bad feeling in his stomach, but I think he's going to lean on making the call, but what is really Brad doing this with? Is he really going to barrel 3 streets on me with a busted big slick, ace, queen, etc.? Queens plus have you beat. 10s, 8s, possible sets. So Doug losing to a lot, and if anybody can make a good fold, it's the 2 seed.
We've seen him do it.
Doug is deep in the tank. He hates the spot that he's in. I'm glad to see him thinking hard about this one because this is the first moment that I 100% know that we've got the best hand. Despite being in a difficult situation, Doug is still cracking jokes.
I might be joining you on the stuck train here.
I was thinking about boarding trains to Stuckville. Population 1 currently with McLovin in the 9 seat buried 10K.
Doug's travel plans sound amazing, but I'm doing my best to show no emotion. The longer that he contemplates what to do, the more likely it is that he has a top pair hand or an overpair. I know it, and Doug knows that I know it.
You know what hand I have. It's your hand.
The jiggities. Makes the call. Shows the set. And Brad Owen. Big pot.
We get the call to win a huge pot against one of the main people who inspired me to make poker content on YouTube. I'd watched Doug and Jason Somerville for a long time before seeing Andrew, and then eventually deciding to start my own channel. Nearly 2 hours in, Trey picks up King Jack offsuit in hand number 54. If you haven't noticed yet, there's a hand counter in the bottom right corner of the screen. That's one of several new additions to the revamped stream at the Lodge. Trey's first to act, he raises to 300. It folds to Doug in the big blind who has ace-4 suited. It looks like he's thinking about 3-betting. Instead, he calls. We've got queen-10 suited in the under-the-gun straddle. At the moment, we have a tight image. I consider putting in a 3-bet squeeze. You can see it on my face that I'd like to do it. You can also see in another chart that Petrangelo gave me that when you're in the straddle and an early position player raises, followed by a big blind call, you're supposed to 3-bet Queen 10 suited around 40% of the time. When this course comes out and you see all the charts, it's going to completely change your game. In the meantime, I'll show you some charts occasionally in interesting spots as they come up. I like to just flat and close the action. We're going 3 ways to the flop. It comes ace-9 deuce rainbow. We've got nothing except some backdoor draws. Doug checks his top pair. We check. Trey wants to rep the ace that Doug has. He bets 425. If Doug folds, my mind immediately goes towards the thought of check raising. Our hand isn't really good enough to call, but we have lots of cards that can help us on the turn. We can rep hands like sets of 9s and deuces, as well as ace-9 and ace-deuce. If Doug calls, I should just give up. But now that we're getting 4-1, and with my tight image to fall back on in case we're not able to make a hand, I can perhaps cash in on the credit that I have built up and get a bluff through if I see an opening later. I make a speculative call. With no real draws out there other than to the wheel, it should look like I've got at least a pair, if not a monster, given the fact that I've overcalled on a relatively dry board. The turn is the deuce of clubs, giving us the flush draw, and fake trips if we want to represent it. We're by far the most likely to be holding a deuce in our hand. If you go back to the chart, you see that we're supposed to be defending our straddle with all but 3 suited deuces. Doug checks, we check. Trey knows that the deuce is bad for him, he gives up and checks back. The bad news is that the river is the 9 of spades, we break the flush, but we'll have a lot of full houses and sometimes even quads. Doug checks. He knows that I'll often have at least an ace, if not something much stronger. I didn't flat with backdoor draws to have a perfect bluff opportunity fall into our lap and not take advantage of it. I bet 1200 into 2200. It should look like I'm trying to get called, and again, the only draw that missed is something like 5-4, so I'm going to have a monster a ton of the time. Trey folds his king high. Doug has a much tougher decision. He doesn't beat anything that I'd be betting for value, including some aces like ace-10, ace-jack, and maybe even sometimes ace-queen. I'm sure that he has a 6's hand, and the fact that I've played snug the whole session in the back of his mind as he contemplates what to do. Ultimately, Doug folds the best hand. You can't fault him for making the laydown. I took a strange line that I wouldn't necessarily always take if it weren't for some game flow factors at play. There's a $100 straddle on. Boston Jimmy has ace-king offsuit on the button. He raises to 400. I'm in the big blind with my favorite hand. I'm going to be 3-betting.
Ooh, you gotta be kidding me. You gotta
There's
be
no right
kidding
way to
me.
play jiggities, so it doesn't matter what I do.
Amazing, amazing. Boston Jimmy, the ace-king offsuit, raises it up. Brad Owen 3-bets to 1.5 thousand with the pocket jacks.
See some action here.
We definitely are. Now, will Boston Jimmy decide to just smooth call, play a little post flop, or is the price of poker about to go up?
This is a very interesting hand developing. I've got pocket jacks once more against ace-king, but the dynamics are way different this time. This is a button versus big blind scenario in which ranges are going to be much wider. The opponent and I just happen to be at the top of those ranges. Boston Jimmy puts in a huge 4-bet to 5,600, leaving himself with only 3,500 behind. After seeing the 4-bet, I'm not exactly fist pumping. In fact, there's a decent chance that I'm completely smoked. Being up against ace-king is one of the best case scenarios. I only flatted Jesse's 3-bet over my early position raise with jacks. In a big blind versus button hand, I'm 5-bet jamming. Boston Jimmy makes the snap call. I'm not excited to see that. The button asks if I want to run it once or twice. Twice isn't very fun, so I say, let's go once.
Brad has declared running it once. Wow. Wow. Brad's either going to get the early double here, roughly a double, or get stacked right out of the gate. Here we go.
It's an $18,000 pot, and the flop comes queen 8-3 with 2 hearts. We fade the ace and king on the flop. The opponent has some backdoor draws, though. The turn is the deuce of diamonds, immediately putting an end to the button's backdoor chances. All we need to do to win a massive pot starting out is to avoid an ace or king one more time. The river is the 8 of spades. Running it once pays off. We win an enormous pot shortly into the stream. For a hand that there's no right way to play, we're playing jiggities quite well. It's always wild to me how quickly things can change in poker, particularly at these stakes. 1 minute you're up a car, the next minute you're down a car, the next, Rampage opens at 300 with queen 10 suited from under the gun +1, and you have pocket kings right next to him. I flat to set the trap. Part of why I showed the previous hand with the 2 ace queens is to drive home the fact that nearly every hand is getting 3-bet. With Rampage raising as the first player to act, I'm concerned that it might set off alarm bells if I immediately 3-bet. I might as well just play my hand face up at that point. For deception purposes, I like to sprinkle in some calls with aces and kings, especially if there are aggressive opponents behind me. We're fortunate that Jesse wakes up with jiggities on the button. He can mix in calls, but he 3-bets at 1,500. Rampage folds. Not only does my trap work out, there's another dynamic at play that benefits us greatly. Jesse has had aces several times this session, as well as some other strong hands like ace-king offsuit, mixed in with the 10-9 suited 3-bet, making him appear to be super aggressive when really, he's just had it a huge majority of the time. He could think that I think he's picking on me and would potentially be making a move on him when I back 4-bet to 5,000. The graphics show that I have 3,700 behind, but I have around 4,500 or so on top of my 4-bet. Jesse won't be calling. He's either going to fold or jam. With how I played this hand and how Jesse thinks that I may be perceiving him, it'll be tough for him to get away. Jesse puts in the 5-bet shove, our 4-bet size, and kind of handcuffed him. We make the call. Jesse's a buddy of mine. I turn over the kings first, imagining that they're best. Jesse shows that he has jacks for some extra run good, and because Jesse's a class act, he hits me with a slightly premature. The dealer asks if we want to go once or twice. I definitely don't want to run the risk of this chopping. I want to either get unstuck or be put out of my misery for the day. I say, let's just go once. If you get it, you get it. An $18,000 pot is at stake. If we can hold, we'll be out of the $6,000 hole we're in, and we'll actually be up a few thousand. The flop comes 9-5-3 with 2 clubs. It's great for us since we even have the backdoor flush draw. The turn is another 9. Jesse's drawing dead to one of the last 2 jacks in the deck. The river is the 10 of spades, securing us the victory. I'm glad to get the win, but would have preferred to have gotten it against someone else at the table. Jesse's one of the nicest guys in poker. He lives right next to me in Las Vegas, and he throws some great summertime barbecues. Here, there's a $400 straddle on. Nick just limps in with ace-queen offsuit in the hijack. He's a recreational player. He deserves a ton of credit for having the guts to even join us at the lodge for these stakes, since some people, pros even, won't play poker in Texas. They can't handle the swings. I like Nick, but I'm happy to try and isolate him in position with king 10 suited. I raised it 2,000. The big blind wakes up with ace-king offsuit, and this is when things get very interesting.
Brad is going to probably get 3-bet, and I would imagine he, depending on the sizing, guys, he might defend with king 10 suited. But Chinese gamblers played so close to the vest the whole night that maybe you even fold this hand.
What is he going to make this, 5.5?
Well, he's got a limp in there. I think he's going to make it like 7,000 at least. Maybe 8 from out of position, 4x, something like that. We'll see. Yeah, 7,000. And that's probably just a hair too small to fold king 10 suited. I think Nick can just limp fold now. Unless he's thinking about doing something crazy, you know? Yeah, he's just going to fold the ace-queen. And now Brad's getting about 2-1 in position with the suited Broadway, and he's going to continue. So here we go.
We've got a $15,000 pot against a guy who's been playing snug today. However, he was set up well in this situation to go for a light 3-bet. I played with the same player the night before on stream. This is a flashback to that session in which he 3-bet squeezed with a small suited ace in a similar scenario. Back to this hand, we're heads up in position. The flop comes queen 7-6 rainbow with 1 club. We have 1 over and some strong backdoor draws. Any card above 7 that doesn't pair the board is going to give us at least a gutter. Clubs are live as well. Plus, this flop is good for my range. I'll realistically have all the sets, even top set, and I can have 7-6 suited for 2 pair. I wouldn't expect the big blind to have any of those hands very often except a set of queens. Pretty frequently, he'll just have ace high, whether it's ace king like he has here, or a small suited ace like he had in the previous clip that I showed you. The opponent doesn't want to quit on this yet. He down bets to 5,000. My sense is that he has me beat but is weak. I could flat to peel one off since I'm getting a good price and I'm in position. I figure I'm likely going to have to bluff at this at some point to take it down though. Might as well try it here when I have maximum leverage. A raise looks much stronger than if I call this bet. The opponent checks the turn and I fire at that point. There's almost no shot that I'll get re-raised even if my opponent has a set of queens, so if I raise here and get called, I could potentially even check back the turn and see a river card for free if I want, or I can continue with the heat if I feel like it. Either way, I'll have control of the pot. I go with the option that allows me to win on this street. I raised to 13,000. The stream doesn't really capture it on camera though. Not only will all ace high hands have to fold, but hands like jacks and 10s and 9s are going to hate facing this aggression as well. There's no sweat. The opponent folds right away. We get the biggest pure bluff that I've ever attempted, threw immediately to profit over 12,000 on the hand.
Did he
believe he raised?
He raised it.
And Brad Owen making plays.
Wow, that is definitely something that I was not expecting. He raises Chinese gambler c-bet and
raised to 13K and took it down.
Nice move there by Brad.
And that guy just snapped ace king like it was nothing.
Tune in to this YouTube channel on February 17th at 3 p.m. Central Time to watch Brad Owen, Doug Polk, and Andrew Neem play 5100 cash in our brand new poker studio. It's taken a year of planning and construction plus many hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we're incredibly excited to finally bring you a poker show of the highest quality live from Austin, Texas. Besides Doug, Brad, and Andrew, we've got an amazing cast of players lined up to play 5100 and 200-400 cash games to celebrate the launch of the new studio. Jamie Kerstetter and Joe Ingram will be at the lodge to help out with commentary and player interviews. See you on February 17th at 3 p.m. Central Time.